So Andrew Yang joined YouTuber David Pakman. Actually, pretty interesting interview all the way around that I recommend you guys check out in its entirety. It's about 25 minutes long. Do it on double speed. It takes you even less than that. But there were some of his comments in particular that caught a lot of people's attention on Twitter. Of course, Andrew is going forward with the Forward Party. He's sort of left the Democratic Party, and his focus primarily is on election reforms. So ranked choice voting and making sure that, you know, people don't just have to pick between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is kind of the focus of what he's up to. So Pakman asked him effectively, well, what would your coalition be? Who are you looking to appeal to, and who are you willing to work with on this project? Let's take a listen to a little bit of that.
To make it really specific, if people on the right say the Republican Party is too centrist, I'm an extreme white supremacist or something like that. But I think we need to get, you know, we need single transferable vote or whatever and campaign. You still welcome that because you're on the same page on that one issue.
Yeah, if they're going to help us transition to a more effective democracy, I don't need to know what their stance is on things that I disagree with. People have a sense of where I'm coming from.
Okay.
But right now, I believe that there is an existential threat to the country as a result of the greatest design flaw in the history of the world. That is, and if you will help us resolve that design flaw, then we can have a discussion about anything else under the sun at a time when the democracy actually will stand the test of time.
Very obviously controversial answer.
Getting
very provocative
on Twitter.
Very provocative answer. And he goes on to explain, like, listen, you know, he obviously thinks these people are abhorrent, and he thinks he has confidence that they will lose in the marketplace of ideas. So if they're partnering up for something like ranked choice voting and open primary, something that would open the way to a multi-party democracy, they're effectively signing their own political irrelevance because they're going to be relegated to some, like, you know, extremist fringe party that's going to garner very little electoral support. But ultimately, I mean, there's kind of this bigger, and the interview was very interesting. Pakman asked him a bunch of interesting questions that I think you guys will find insightful as well about tech censorship and all sorts of things. But, you know, it gets to this bigger instinct in recent American politics where rather than expecting the voters to judge the politicians are being asked to, like, judge the voters.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And, like, cleanse their coalitions of anyone who might be outside. Look, if you're an extreme white supremacist, white nationalist, like, that's obviously not an edge case. But also there's so much shaming and calling if you don't use the right language, if you're not there on every single issue, then you're also supposed to be pushed out of the circle. And it's quite antithetical to having any sort of solidarity and having a coalition to actually get things done.
Yeah, look, I'm sure we'll get roasted for it too, but that's how politics works. He's like, look, on this personal design question, anybody who wants to work with me, I'll take their vote. After that, in this, you know, I mean, frankly, in the system that Yang is advocating for, these people would actually have less power than they would in a partisan
That's exactly
democracy.
right.
So,
right, because now they have influence within the party.
Yeah, if you have a small group, which is really dedicated, I've talked a lot here about Nassim Taleb's tyranny of the minority and the dictatorship of the small minority, and then the idea that they could then vote in a very partisan primary, setting the rules and the preferences for the entire population. I mean, under the rules that Yang is proposing, that actually would be neutered, and it would make it so we would have a less extreme amount of politics in our actual democratic design. So if you do care about silencing or at least, you know, trying to mollify or stop the influence of people who have abhorrent views, this would probably be the best way in order to get that done. But of course, nobody thinks about it from an actual policy and practical point of view. And Yang, to his credit, what I really like about this current iteration of Andrew Yang is after losing the New York primary, he seems to be returning to what made him him in the first place. And I think that having that honesty, and really the willingness to just have a conversation with anybody under the sun, which I think is very important. He is being pressed and asked questions which you would never hear from the corporate media, and then answering them, I think, truthfully to his actual stated aims. So I very much welcome, this current iteration. And I think it was very brave of him to say so, despite the fact that he's going to get attacked for it. I think it's exactly the right attitude that you have to have if you're being really serious about what you want to get done.
Yeah, and having them as like they're voting for this in some ballot initiative or whatever, whatever is different than having people with, you know, abhorrent views who are helping to drive the direction of whatever you're doing, et cetera. Like, that's obviously a very different scenario. There's also something very interesting that happens when Pacman asks him this question, which is that you actually see Andrew sit for a second and think before responding, which is like, it's amazing how unusual it is for people to actually be sort of grappling with something in real time and not just spew out whatever talking points or cover story they think you ultimately want to hear. Now, as you know, for me, the jury is a little bit more still out on the new project, on whether it's going to be effective. I also think that he really needs to get, you know, any sort of big money influence out of and say he's not going to take large-scale corporate money or large-scale donations, because I do think that those things ultimately could influence the direction in a nefarious way. I'm much more concerned about that sort of influence ultimately. So again, I have questions about the project in particular, but I did think this exchange was interesting, and it is the sort of thing that I'm sure he knew in that moment that, like, this is not going to sound good and people are going to cut it and they're going to, you know, they're going to hate it and it's going to turn off a certain percentage of the population. But he comes with what he believes the correct and the honest answer is here. So pretty interesting exchange.
Very interesting.
All right, guys, enjoy your day. We'll have more for you later. Hey, guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.